these platforms are in some ways almost addictive to advertisers as well. You can kind of find them anywhere in the world. Incredible targeting, incredible tools at pretty bargain level CPMs. It's really hard to say no. That's really addictive. It's hard to kind of cut that out of your plan.
You're listening to Media Monitor, where we break down what's happening in the media and the advertising industry and tell you what it actually means. Hey, Sean, how's it going?
Good, Kelly. How are you?
I'm good. The week of spring break is upon us, so I'm glad I caught you. I feel like it's a lot of out of offices, a lot of finding care for your child, because the spring breaks, they just keep getting longer.
Yeah. And also just happen at times when the working world does not stop. Summer, I feel like at least you could kind of like things get a little quieter, but like a random week in April or March really doesn't do any good.
Yeah, that end of quarter spring break convergence is never good for anyone. But here we are doing what we do best. Business.
Doing business. End of quarter.
End of quarter. Well, so Sean, I think we've got to talk about Meta and YouTube and what's been going
big deal.
on. Yeah, I think we have to talk about that. So what I thought we would do today is I can just, for our listeners who aren't as close, I'll give them a little bit of background, bring them up to speed, and then we can talk about,
some solid, real mid takes. Just not even a hot take, just a nice mid, this could happen.
Well, I think you're pretty good at predicting things. So let's see how you do today. But
let's see.
I'll dive in. So last week, a jury delivered a verdict that I think could fundamentally, this is me talking, I think could fundamentally change how we think about social media and who's responsible for the consequences of social media. So it's Meta and Google that were found liable, and they're found liable for designing platforms that contributed to a young woman's addiction and worsening mental health. The jury awarded millions of dollars in damages and concluded that the companies didn't just host content, they actually engineered experiences meant to keep kids hooked. So I think what's so significant here is that it's the legal theory behind it. They're not blaming the posts. It's targeting the platforms themselves and saying that the addictive nature of the features, like the endless scroll, the autoplay, is making the most vulnerable users, falling into this like compulsive use and leading to depression and serious issues. So I actually once read, or maybe I saw a movie on this, that the endless scroll was modeled after slot machines. That was kind of like the base, which makes sense to me. So I think we're hitting a different moment in time with this, not just this one case. There are thousands of cases that are being brought.
I think over 2,000, which is just a wild number to think about.
I was going to say, I'm sure you know the exact stat.
We'll just pretend, we'll hedge. We're like, that's something over 2,000. Yeah, we don't need to be that much of a nerd. But yeah, it is a wild amount of like a mountain of legal cases that are piling up on this very specific topic, right? Not even just like generically lawsuits against social media, but this specific topic around its addictive nature, about kind of problem for teens and mental health, right? It's all roughly the same topic, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And so this isn't the first time that these things have been brought up. So I thought maybe we would take a walk down memory lane and just kind of go through the history of what has happened in the past. And then, why are we here? Why are we bringing this up? The impact on the advertising industry. Has there been any changes to the amount of ads that they can run? That's kind of what we want to focus on. And given that this feels a little different, maybe we'll talk about how do we think it's going to impact us going forward. So turn the clock back, Sean. Tell us where this, where this started and what happened.
Who is it? Tina Turner? If we could turn back time.
Last week it was TLC.
Deep cut. Yeah. I'm trying to, you know what, maybe we have to see if we could pull demographics, and I'll try to be a better fit for our audience demographics. I might need to kind of pull it up a little bit and try to figure out something more Gen Z appropriate. I'm a big Olivia Rodrigo stan, so maybe there's some time-based metaphor I could throw in there, some lyric.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Olivia Dean.
She's good. No, not as much. I'm more of a, like, that nice, like, high school angst around your
Mhm.
boyfriend really speaks to me as a man in my 40s. So, speaking of YouTube and Meta, going back in time, I think neither of these companies are really not familiar with lawsuits, right? I think kind of basically since 2012, there's been roughly 2 to 3 lawsuits that have made kind of major scandal headlines every year for these companies going back to 2012, right? If we think back to like Cambridge Analytica, right, that was a big one for Facebook. So collectively, these platforms have seen a lot of different kind of critiques, lawsuits, scandals pop up, specifically on child harm related to kind of impacting children, or at least, folks under 18. Kind of collectively between these two platforms, there's been, let me see, 1, 2, 3, about 10 major scandals that have happened since, basically 2020 alone. So there, both the commentary and kind of frequency that's coming up around, are these platforms the right fit for kids, right? Keeps coming up. On a prior episode, we had talked around Australia just recently rolling out a ban on teens using social media. And Australia is just kind of one of many. Within the last year, I think there's 7 countries globally. So, Australia, Malaysia, I think Spain maybe put something out there recently in terms of banning teens or under, right, kids from using social media. So there's this kind of momentum that's really honing in on, is this the right product for a child to use? And I think that's kind of a little newer, but the idea of these companies facing scandal and what that means for advertising has basically been a perpetual question going back to the mid-aughts. But what's fascinating is like digging into the numbers, is because I think the big question is like, okay, so what does this do for advertising, right? Do people leave the
Right.
platform? And essentially did this whole analysis where we looked at both like that quarterly earnings view. So like from a top line revenue perspective, what happened at these companies. And then we also looked at our own data going back to historicals of 2008, what happened to advertising spend? And basically the answer is nothing. Nothing happened.
Nothing.
So like
Nothing at all.
nothing at all. In the quarter, following quarter, basically universally, Facebook, 21% growth in terms of revenue, 22% growth in terms of ad spend on average across every single one of these scandals, right? And so we looked at, for Meta alone, we looked at 30 total scandals. For YouTube, we analyzed 26 of them. And so between these two, when we look at kind of the earnings, right, for YouTube, it's like 13% growth on earnings, 20% on ad spend, post these kind of scandals breaking. And again, those similar stats for Meta. So I think there's this kind of tension that's going on between, we hear a lot of advertisers saying, oh, we should boycott the platform, we should cut back ad spend, right? This is harmful here. And then we see the reality of when the results come up. And the answer is at least at a high level, so far, between all of these scandals, nothing happens. Or at least something happens. People continue to spend.
People continue to spend. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like this is different, but I mean, you just said 56 scandals and nothing changed. In fact, things continue to grow. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. I wonder, and I don't know, you've probably been seeing this in the press too. People are calling this like the tobacco moment.
Yeah. That like
You
that
know,
watershed.
exactly. So I guess Benioff, Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, is probably like, giving himself a little pat on the back because he said it in 2018. He said that essentially he declared Facebook was the modern day equivalent of cigarettes and that social media companies should be regulated as such. And here we are, people are bringing that up, but I'm sure, back in the early days of cigarettes, people knew they were bad, but people kept on puffing away, right? It wasn't until regulations were required, like there was a change that things actually started to change. So I'm curious
Yeah.
where this is going to go. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's something that I wrestle with too, right? Because it's like you can make a call and say like, oh, this is going to be it, and kind of follow the trend right now where a lot of folks are making that call. Or you could look at these, 50 plus scandals and go, most of the time these calls happened the last times and nothing happened. So it was like, which of these is the right call? Here's what I would say, using a little bit of a, well, actually, data nerd kind of thing, is if I look at the data, there's 2 things that are going to kind of tell me pretty quick what's going on. Is one, what's happening with the customers themselves, the consumers of the platforms? If we start to see monthly active users start to plateau, maybe dip, that to me is the first kind of watershed moment that says, yeah, this is going to materially impact ad spend. The second is price. I think these platforms are in some ways almost addictive to advertisers as well, because you have so much going for advertisers. These platforms reach billions of people. You can kind of find them anywhere in the world almost instantaneously. There's incredible targeting out of the box. There's incredible tools out of the box that, like, if this is your first ad campaign or your 50th or 1000th, all of the tools work really well on delivering the ads to who you want, where you want, and at pretty bargain level CPMs where it's really hard to say no to. I could optimize my platform, I can get my reach and frequency, and I could do it at a fraction of the cost. For an advertiser, that's really addictive, right? And that's, I think, why we see the ad spend keep going where we go, is it's hard to kind of cut that out of your plan and figure out where you're going to make that up at a price point that's effective, right? I think that's the tough.
So when you say you're going to watch price, are you saying you're going to watch CPMs?
Yeah.
And if they creep up, that's potentially suggesting fewer people are investing. This is the old supply and demand.
Old supply and demand. I'm not going to make another TLC reference. That's done and gone. But the short answer is yeah, right? Like if we start to see social CPMs, going more into like $8, $9 for like display or carousel on Instagram. The Instagram.
I think it was Reddit last week.
To be fair though, that does match with my TLC references. It fits. So I think like that's where I'm paying close attention to is like the monthly active users. We can kind of track that, right? We know that like Facebook has kind of like plateaued off, but let's see what happens with Instagram. But for me, the real tell is going to be price. And what we've been hearing in market, what I've been seeing, what I've been reading, what I've been talking to clients is there's also this kind of split that's happening on a lot of these new like AI optimization tools, where like the tools for optimization on these platforms before the rollout of AI were already really pretty good. And so for a lot of big brands, big agencies, at the top line, right? They've already done enough to optimize. The AI isn't really giving them more juice for their squeeze. And so, but it is adding cost per acquisition. It is adding to their CPMs. And so there's a bit of a hesitation to roll into these platforms. So I'm curious to see like if this continues, right? We might see natural price creep up based on just the cost of running campaigns, the actual cost to run the ads themselves. And if users start to kind of fall off, right, you got to get that revenue somehow. So you might kind of juice up either the cost of the ads, maybe you introduce more ads, right? There's this whole mix of things that like if you want to keep that revenue train growing, there's only so many levers you can pull. So I could see a scenario in another couple months where price starts to meaningfully go up. We start to observe it. And then that might be coupled with over 2,000 lawsuits, a material change for these companies.
I think those are good indicators to watch. Monthly active users, price, it makes sense. So I think what you're saying is based on history, we don't know that there's going to be any change here, but the volume of cases warrants us to keep a closer tabs. And the way to do it is through monthly active users and that CPM. So yeah. I think that makes sense. I think we have our plan, our playbook here, and that was a really good summary, Sean.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you, first off. And I think maybe, given the week and the headlines going into spring break happening, maybe it's a good place to stop for this week and do kind of a shorter one for us.
And I'll just say, you know what? Long weekend, put your phones down, get outside. Maybe it's springish where you are. Maybe. And feel good.
Yeah, well, lovely connecting. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Sean.
That's Media Monitor. Follow us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts every Wednesday for a new episode. And as always, thanks for listening.